Welcome to Travel Better Together, the podcast where we explore group travel and the travel industry in general and the passion that drove us to the industry. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Kenny Totten, the CEO and founder of AllFly, that is making group travel easy. How are you today, Kenny?
I'm doing well. Not too bad. It's beautiful down here in Florida. We're approaching on summer, so I like to get out of the office for a few minutes, walk my dog in the sun, and then get back to work.
I love that. So tell us, Kenny, how did you get into the group travel industry?
Yeah, so our founding story is a little bit weird and different. So both my co-founder and I, we actually referee Division One college basketball. And back in 2016, 2017, the years are all running together now. We got paired together to referee for about a week. So we drove around the southeastern United States for about a week, and he was so busy with work that he asked me to drive him for the entire time. And he sat in the passenger seat on his computer with a stack of papers about this thick. And we really didn't talk much at first, but I'm naturally an inquisitive person and I love to understand, like, what are you doing? How does that work? I've always had that curiosity. And so I started asking him, and I was like, what are you doing here? And he basically said that he runs a travel agency and his travel agency specializes in group airfare. Now, I just graduated with a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, and I was running my own digital marketing and web design agency, a little small boutique, like 1-2 man show. It never got off the ground and went anywhere big. We had to end up shutting it down, but I was running it at the time, and he started telling me about group travel and what it was and all the pain points. And I saw him with a stack of papers. And I was like, oh my God, like, so you're just doing this whole thing by like paper and pen and 3-ring binders? And Eric basically said, yeah. So after many hours and many miles in the car, he started asking me what I do. And basically at the time I was building websites for nonprofits, lawyers, small businesses. And his website was needed a little bit of TLC. So after a while, he's like, "Well, why don't you come and work with me? Like, I'll hire you, and for I think my first contract was like $2,000 a month. I took care of social media marketing, the website, everything, and then we started having some success." And I started doing some of the sales just naturally, right? Because he didn't have a sales department or anything. And it got so successful that he basically asked me to come join the company. I shut down my agency just because I like to focus on one thing at a time and just go like all in on that thing. And about a year into it, I was watching the business and I thought it was kind of insane how group travel is so offline and it happens so differently than what like a modern user is used to, that I convinced Eric to basically spin off a new venture and make a very tech enabled, tech forward version of his agency. And that was how AllFly was born.
Wow, love that story. Love that story. We do have share those commonalities of facing the struggles of group travel, learning from those struggles from someone who has more expertise in the industry and seeing how they are facing their problems and realizing like, hey, there is ways to do something to do this better with technology. Technology can really help us here. I like that. So how long ago was that, Kenny?
So I think I joined in 2016, worked for about a year, and then we incorporated the company in 2018. And then we basically worked on building out the tech for 2 years before COVID hit. And then that's a whole thing. But yeah, 2016, 2017 is when I joined the team. And then 2018 is where we got serious about the technology and kind of redirecting the vision for the company.
Okay, okay. What are some of the traditional methods that travel agencies used to book air travel before they started using AirFly? AllFly.
Yeah, so this was the part that blew my mind. So when I came in, I knew nothing about group travel at all. So I really had like fresh eyes. And the team that I joined originally are experts. These people have been doing group air travel for like years, if not some of them decades. So the crazy thing that blew my mind about the way group air is booked, if you want to book a group contract, meaning 10 or more seats on a plane, you actually cannot do it online. You have to call the airlines over the phone, talk to a human agent, and request quotes. Now, this process can take anywhere from, at its best, 7 to 15 minutes, at its worst, hours, right? Because you're subject to hold times, you're subject to, hey, I want to have 60 people on this group. Or I have 60 people in this group. Do you have space? And then the agent has to run through and check availability. It's not an easy process. So I saw this problem, and I saw the way that so many companies before us started making things that were offline online. And so I saw the way that the taxi industry came online with Uber. I saw some of the things that were happening in our travel space. And my long term thesis was group travel will all happen online at some point in the future. And if we don't build the future, we're going to become the past. And so that was really, we actually started the company a little bit out of fear, right? That if we don't do this, someone else is going to do it, and that's going to be really bad for business. So the whole offline nature of the business and how clunky and slow and not user friendly that it was really the kind of the lit the fire under us to start trying to book group air travel on the internet.
Of course, I completely understand. Group travel has been one is one of those industries who has seen the least innovation on their side, especially on the business that are operating the industry. I completely understand that there's a lot of room to grow still to this date. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced when building AllFly?
So one of the biggest challenges, and this is really just my lesson learned, where if I have to do another startup, I want to choose one with very little dependencies. So as you know, in the travel world, we have to build on top of other people's stuff. So if you wanted to build a travel company today, you would have to pick Sabre or Amadeus. These are big pieces of software that you get travel content and you manage and create bookings. You would have to pick one of those platforms and then build on top of it. So you're subject to their limitations. The biggest trouble that we ran into is making group airfare happen online for groups of 10 or more very, very hard. And there's a lot of legacy limitations that basically stop you from getting a quote instantly for 30 passengers on a flight. It was this reason that during the pandemic, we actually had a slight pivot to the business, and we actually started focusing on booking corporate meetings and events because those passengers don't need a group contract. They can just buy single tickets, and then we have to lump them as part of a group for payments and
Hmm.
reporting and management. So we actually were a little bit of victims of the airlines being really slow. And if you're not on their roadmap, you may just run out of time, you may run out of money. So the thing that we learned is enterprise sales cycles are really long. We don't own the underlying technology, so it was really hard to build and innovate. And I think that if you are going to do something like make an Expedia for group airfare, you have to be so well capitalized and you have to be funded for 5, 10 years just to deal with the enterprise sales cycle of an airline. So we had a small pivot, and now today we really focus more on booking team offsites. And then we're pushing towards becoming a full service travel management company that would compete against the Agencias, Concurs, and Navans of the world. Group travel is still in our DNA and it's still our expertise. But I would say that was one of the hardest things and the biggest lessons learned, where if you have dependencies on others, you don't control your own destiny 100%.
Very good point. Very good point. Across your journey, what are some of the latest trends you've seen in group travel?
So in group travel, especially in people booking team offsites and like corporate retreats, incentive trips, I don't know if you've seen this of like where people go, but last year we booked a ton of Cancun and Cabo, and it seems like a cycle, right? And then this year we haven't booked as much Cancun and Cabo. So now we've done a lot more stuff to Europe. We've done a lot more stuff to Portugal and Spain. Um, and so that's been a trend of just where people choose to take their trip. And then what I would say is there's been an increased focus on budgets. So budgets have definitely tightened. People are looking at travel as a way, as a place to cut back at times. And so we've had to create a lot of features inside of the product to give administrators more control and insight into how they manage their company's travel program.
That is super interesting. Very interesting trends, both geographically and culturally. What are driving those trends, right? Very interesting to hear. And last question, Kenny. What are some of the tips that you can give our audience for using AllFly?
Yeah. So what I would say is we have a lot of companies come to us because their company is going to do a team offsite and they want to go somewhere and have a great experience. One of the tips that I can say in using AllFly is number one, come up with a budget and be realistic about your budget. I would say one out of every 10 of our customers come to us and they have an unrealistic budget for airfare. So, for example, someone will come to us and they'll be like, I want to fly to the Dominican Republic and my airfare budget is $475 per person. And we look at that and we're like, well, that's great that that's what you want to spend. But the reality is, getting into Punta Cana will be anywhere from most places in the United States will be anywhere from $700 to $1,100. So I would say, number one, come up with realistic budgets. Number two, when you're creating travel policy and you're getting ready for your trip, be sure to communicate frequently and often repeat yourself with your travelers on what the expectations are for booking, what the travel policies are, when they're supposed to be in. I would say that we catch a lot of gripe when someone wants to request a flight and they request a flight and then that flight is out of policy and then the travel manager says you can't take that flight. And then the traveler gets mad, the company gets mad, and often we see that so much of this can be solved with pre-trip communication. So I would say set realistic travel policies and communicate with your teams before they start to book the trip. Because I would say, booking their large expenses. Like, do you guys at Trip Loop take like a team offsite each year?
Yeah, to Chihuahua,
Oh,
Mexico.
okay, cool. Yeah, and I would assume that's no small expense, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a hassle to travel from Austin, Texas to Chihuahua, Mexico.
Do you guys fly or drive?
Fly.
Oh, you guys fly. Okay. Yeah. So, like, what do you guys do before the trip? Like, do you have a team meeting? Do you send out a Slack or an email? What is your guys' process like prior to the trip?
Yeah, we coordinate between the team to, of course, fix the dates and the venue where we'll be traveling. Most of the team is already there, so it's mostly a
Oh,
matter of me coordinating my flight schedule to get there and find good
oh,
prices.
nice. Nice, nice, nice. And do you guys use like a meeting planner or anything, or do you book everything on your own?
Yeah, we book everything on our own. We're a
Nice,
small
nice.
team as well, so it's no trouble there.
Do you like running a smaller team? Like in your mind, if you had to run like any size company, what would be like the perfect fit for you?
Maybe a team that is the maybe around a 25 people team, maybe 50 people team, so we can cover all the bases. It's not such a big team, but it feels small enough that it is manageable and scalable.
I'm the
Yeah,
same as you. We're at like 30 people today. And I was like, 30 people is really nice. Cause like you said, you know everybody, you have a relationship, and you can still get things done. Like people can be specialists and be focused. I mean, we have to have a lot of like generalists, but you could generally like have people take on projects where it's not like when we were only 11 people everyone did everything. So like 30 to 50, I think is cool. I wonder what it's going to be like to do like 100 to 200. It's probably going to be weird. Like you don't know everyone. Some people think that you're like the big, like some big bad, like ominous figure, which is kind of weird. But I'm the same as you. Like 30 to 50, I think is it's a pretty good sweet spot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And yeah, I bet it is at least interesting to have people working for you that you don't really know. That'll be
Yeah.
a weird feeling.
Or that everyone knows you and you don't know them, which is also weird. We actually had our first person. We were at a conference in Las Vegas, and we've been doing our own podcast now for about like a year and a half. We're on, I think, like 80 something episodes, and we had our first ever person come up to Connor and I on the street and basically say like, "Oh my God, you guys are the host of Travel Nerds." We did not know this person at all, and we're like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, I watch you on Spotify." And it was actually like the coolest thing. I was like, that's what it must be like to be famous. But being famous is times 1,000 because that never stops. That's happened to us once in a year. But it was still kind of cool to like be picked out of a crowd and be like, "Oh, I watch you on Spotify." That's crazy.
Yeah. No, yeah, that is awesome, Kenny. Congratulations for that.
Thanks. It's the small little wins, right? So
Yeah. You gotta celebrate the small wins.
yeah, for sure.
Last question, Kenny. For companies, for people who are starting their own travel companies and travel agencies right now, what is one tip that you would give them?
Oh my God, this is such a tough question. Whew. Okay. What I would say is be very focused in the beginning. Travel is such a big category, but just try to be an expert on one tiny little thing, and do as much as you can by yourself. Um, we just got lucky and we used this service called Shepherd to hire overseas talent. It was much cheaper than hiring an American employee. So I guess my kind of tip would be like stay very focused. Um, Watch your cost because running out of money and running out of kind of enthusiasm are really the two reasons why startups die. And then just you're going to have to go all in. So I wouldn't run a travel company and try another side project. I wouldn't run a travel company and have any other focus because it will consume your entire life. It's 24/7 because travel's 24/7. So just be ready for a lot of pain and a lot of heartache. Because if you run a travel company, it's coming. There's no way around it, but it's a really good industry. The people in travel are typically really friendly, really nice. People go out of their way to help you, which is really nice. So I'd say, just focus, watch your money, and just get ready for the pain. Because I mean, I'm sure when you're building Trip Loop, I mean, you guys have been around for quite a while. I'm sure you have stories upon stories about like near death experiences or just how hard it is to start and scale a company. What would your advice be for someone that was like a travel entrepreneur?
Well, I'll say that one of the biggest lessons that we've learned is to deal with monetization early on. So we can
Mm,
de-risk the venture significantly by pinpointing exactly how much are you going to be charging and for what services, and then building materials on top of that. But by first defining those components, it'll be much easier to then develop the business on top of that and de-risking it because you already know how much you will be charging for what and to whom you will be selling that, right? So
yeah,
you don't have to do so much experimenting.
it's actually a really good point. And I don't know if you felt like this too. This is one of the things that I learned. It was a hard lesson to learn because it cost me a lot of money, but I think when coming up with pricing, you can charge more than you think that you can. I know that before I joined AllFly, I had my own agency, and I was so desperate to get the next customer that I was charging way too little. So what actually happened is I started an agency. I was making websites and running social media and running ad programs, and I was charging hundreds of dollars each month. And people were like, "Sure, I'll sign up." And what actually ended up happening was I wasn't making enough money to bring on a staff member to adequately run it. So everything was being run, but it was being run poorly because I didn't charge enough money. And that was my own kind of immaturity of just saying, like, oh my God, if I could get a client for $400 a month, that's amazing. Because I was just coming out of college, and like in my mind, $400 a month was like, oh my God, I could eat Chick-fil-A like 30 times. Like, that's amazing. Like, that's 30 Chick-fil-A trips. What? So I would say that you can charge more than you think. Don't be afraid about losing customers to price. The world is really big, and there's going to be someone out there that pays for your service. You just have to find them in a capital efficient manner. So I don't know if you would agree, if you guys have played with pricing over the years. I think right now our pricing could be optimized a little bit more. I think we charge too little in some spots. But I don't know if you guys have experimented a lot with price.
Yes, we have experimented a lot with price. And I think you bring a great point to the table, Kenny. One of the most common mistakes entrepreneurs make is to charge too little for their services or their products. It is a very, very, very common mistake, right? Like, as you're saying, for the reasons you're saying, like, you're excited to start a new business and you're excited to
Yeah.
have new customers. So it is common that you undersell the actual benefits that they're getting from your product, right? It's very common. That's why I think the monetization research at the beginning is quite important. So you
Mm.
can prevent leaving that money on the table, right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ken. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. Everyone, please check allfly.com. You will be excited about the features that are making group travel easy from allfly.com. Uh, and if you are starting a travel company and would like to know how to build it better, please reach out to any of us, to Kenny or I. We'll be happy to help you. Thank you so
For
much.
sure. Thank you.